Holy cannoli, it's been a hot minute, hasn't it?
Yeah. What's this game?
Oh, man. You know, playing a bunch of games at once like we were meant to made a lot more sense when we were able to keep up the 3 episodes a week thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not throwing shade at you. You're obviously, I love you.
I love you too.
You're still working through it, but we didn't mean for that to be as long as it did. But anyway, let's get back to this. Do you remember what we were doing last time?
No.
We were in the Misericorde trying to pump Catherine for information.
Okay.
Yeah. The more and more I've been thinking about this, I wonder if Catherine dies at the end of the first episode. Hear me out. This feels like a hard read, but we're spending a lot of time with her, getting to know her and her background specifically, and like having big, long conversation, getting to know her character. If someone was going to die, they'd want to make sure they had their screen time beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Also, there's always the possibility that whoever killed Catherine with a C meant to kill Catherine with a K, but got the Catherines mixed up. This is my completely baseless swing for the fences calling for the end of this episode here.
Hell yeah.
God, it's been since June. Oh, God. Oh, whatever. Oh, right. Hold on. I got to do Hedwig voice. Well, I got to work it out of my system first.
Yeah. Hold on, I think it's in there somewhere. And then she was also very nervous, right? And also, like, added a lot of just random mumbling and stuttering into her talking. Because that was very consistent with how she talked, right? So this, and then... But she wasn't very intense. She was more just kind of worried and quietly... Yeah? Is that it?
That sounds about right.
Catherine had wandered over to our side of the Misericorde, nursing a drink in one hand and resting the other on her hip.
I don't remember her voice cracking, though.
Oh, she, I think she just had a little too much to drink.
Too right. I heard her bawling over here and thought to stay out of it, but now she's at the table yammering on and on about cats.
Oh, I think that was Flora.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the last episode, Flora was like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Will you teach me how to draw?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Margaret was also very angry at us for very reasonable reasons.
How are you faring?
Me? I'm well.
Having fun?
To a degree.
We've been consoling Flora. It worked. She's back to being quite irritating. Well, you can thank Hedwig. She's the expert. Oh.
On being irritating?
Did you impart some of your anchoress wisdom?
Yes, I suppose I did.
It was tough, but it was what Flora needed to hear. Marvelous. I still remember visiting your odd little window and asking all about something or other.
Oh, Catherine was one of our visitors, huh? So Hedwig has mentioned that she can't put the voices to the faces.
Mm-hmm.
So she has no idea who was asking her about what.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to know that Catherine was one of the regulars.
You were quite a blunt instrument, if I recall.
Was I?
I once came to the window to ask what the punishment for breaking a promise was. You were prepared with a whole lecture about how I shouldn't be taking any oaths in the first place, with several citations from Matthew on hand, of course.
I am afraid I don't remember that.
It was years and years ago. That doesn't surprise me. Do you remember many of our questions? Do you know who asked what?
I remember questions, but not who asked them. And I wouldn't tell anyone if I did.
Good. I mean, not why I was asking. But good.
Oh, why were you asking then?
So, how's your first thingy?
Oh, it's been fun.
Don't worry about Flora. Someone always cries at one of these. Sometimes more than one person.
That sounds emotionally unhealthy. Oh no.
It's her more often than not. Oh, it's her more often than not. Me? Me crying? Absolutely untrue. I have a reputation to maintain. Uh-huh. Adela's flipped the table over, someone started getting weepy. I'd say you're getting about as rigorous an education in Misericorde etiquette as you can possibly have.
Etiquette?
Yeah.
No, I'll work on that one. It's certainly been a learning experience.
Oh, but it's been fun, right? We're having fun.
Catherine was just as in framing device. Hedwig speaks a little bit a little bit lower, and Catherine was just as wine-addled as Flora had been, but it was clearly affecting her differently. Flora had almost seemed like a different girl. Catherine was simply multiplied. Whatever clarity she had been experiencing when we chatted by the fire earlier had been enhanced with a slightly manic energy.
I'm having fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Because you know the superior would have me hanged if you didn't have a good time.
Really? She put you up to this?
Oh, good heavens, no. I can just intuit these things. You know? I can just see her bearing down on me because you complained.
I don't complain to the superior.
That's good. I mean, not that you have anything to complain about. Sorry, I wasn't insinuating you would complain, just that, By the way, actually, did you know that cow Angela complained about me to her once? To get back at me for... I forgot where I was going with this.
Just trying to drive far away from stuff you don't want to talk about at the moment, huh?
You were going to sit down and take it easy, I think. Yes, thank you, Margaret. Yes, I was.
I could sense that my window was closing. Catherine was a very different kind of drunk than Flora, but it seemed like she, too, was not far from falling to the floor. Actually, Margaret, could you give us a minute?
Of course.
She looked a little confused, but she obliged.
Love her. Very clever. Isn't she just?
Margaret's wonderful. Catherine, I've been meaning to ask you something, and it's very important.
If it's about the cat, it isn't mine.
No, it's not about the cat.
And I need to get Eustace or one of the other crafty ones to help me with my door. I'm sorry if it bothers you. Does the door bother you?
No, it's, It was now or never. James. I spoke to James. He says you can vouch for him about the night that Catherine II died. Can you? Is that true? Catherine's brow furrowed slowly and her eyes adjusted in a strange and unexpected manner. It was like I had forcibly sucked the wine out of her somehow.
You spoke to James. What did he say?
Not much at all. He professed his innocence, though, and he said you might be able to prove it. Something to do with his traveling cloak?
What traveling cloak?
The one that Darcy found. I was speaking in a whisper lower than I had known I was capable of. I was terrified that someone might overhear, but there was no turning back now.
Also, there's like very little subtlety in how she's doing.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't the whole point to try to like work it in naturally and like...
And now it's just like, well, let's just pray that she's blackout drunk enough that she won't remember and then just charge in full force ahead.
There you go.
Not here. We can't talk about this here. Not with everyone else around.
There was someone specifically in the Misericorde right now that Catherine doesn't want to talk about this around. Who's in the Misericorde right now? It's been a hot minute, but I think we can remember. It was Margaret. We just saw her. Flora.
Yep.
Adela. Charity.
Yep.
Is here.
Not Angela anymore. She
Not
was
Angela
here and
anymore.
left.
Hold on. That's...
Adela, did we already say Adela?
Yeah, Catherine. Oh, hold on. There could be 7 at most, right?
Yep.
So, us, Catherine, Adela, Flora, Margaret, Charity.
Yep.
Okay.
Because Angela was here and then left.
So, that means someone of Flora, Margaret, Charity, and Adela is someone that Catherine does not want to say this around.
Interesting.
I'm extrapolating, right? Because it sounds like she's about to say something else, but then
Yeah.
changes it to be a little bit more evasive, right?
Yep.
A little. So, I think one of those 4 she is wary of. Anyway.
Then when? And where? Everyone turned to look at the door in unison.
Are we expecting something? Perhaps Sister Darcy has brought some more food.
Moira, who had been sitting closest to
Moira's here.
Oh, right, Moira's... Because Moira came in to replace...
Angela.
Angela
Okay.
at one point, right, because they went to go fetch her. All right. And Moira we've been sus on for a while now. For various reasons. Moira, who had been sitting closest to the door, stood up to answer it first. She removed the bolt, swung open the door, and...
Ah!
Moira fell onto her backside and scrambled away from the door on all fours. Everyone else screamed and wailed as soon as they saw what was at the door. The same hulking figure that had threatened me at the end of the hallway all those nights ago. The cloaked figure lumbered forward, its metal boots thudding against the stone floor. Everyone made for the back of the room as fast as they could, all yelling at the top of their lungs. I myself felt absolutely petrified, but I could not bring myself to move. I just stood there assuredly white as a sheet, unable to move. I felt like my heart would give up if I took even one step. The monster took another labored step toward me. I stood there, dumbstruck as it brought itself before me. And a gauntleted hand reached under his cloak. With a horrible grinding shriek, it drew its sword. Everyone screamed again. They were practically baying.
Cease your feeble inquiries, Sister Hedwig.
I am not afraid of you.
Could have fooled me.
Could you believe that this was not a lie? Faced with the sword, I felt a knot. The first thing that came to my mind when we saw this scene was like, is she just embellishing this for some reason? Because all of a sudden we lose all of like the background images and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, just like too good to be true, Hedwig, too scared, stands up to the person who was immediately there to be like, cease your inquiries. Like, how did you know she was talking about it at that exact moment? Faced with the sword, I felt an odd sense of peace. The glint of the blade in the candlelight, it offered me a noble release from the predicament I found myself in.
Do not force my hand. Cease.
Did you not hear me? I am not afraid.
Then you truly are a fool.
Strike me down, then. I will gladly die in service to the Lord. I will gladly give myself in defense of what is right and just. If you would have me killed for pursuing the truth, then so be it.
Oh.
Is this like Darcy fucking around?
Maybe.
I could practically hear everyone's head tilting in confusion at once. A musical chord of rustling fabric.
I grow tired of this conversation. Consider this a warning.
Still pointing their sword at me, the figure took a lurching step backward, only to trip on its own cloak.
It's probably Darcy and Esther, right? Because they got the sword, so they had to get the sword out of the...
Yeah, it would have to be... Because Eustace would be the only one with access,
Eustace,
right?
Why did I say Esther? Eustace, yeah.
I mean, it's a good guess if you're looking for like
An
a biblical
E
name
yeah.
and starts with an E.
The woman who had been huddled behind me rushed forward. Adela grabbed the sword that had fallen out of my assailant's hand and he held it at their neck. Adela, stop!
Remove your disguise, Kerr, before I cut off your head and remove it myself.
The cloaked figure held up their hands defensively. Their hands looked far too small for the bulky gauntlets they wore. I glanced down at their legs and was shocked to see that they were twisted and broken. Your legs! Are you all right?
Oh yes, let's make sure this creep's legs are unharmed.
Stop. My legs are all right.
The voice sounded less ragged and imposing now. The figure shifted their weight and I realized that the big metal boots they had been wearing had simply come off in the tumble. With a sense of resignation, the monster lifted its hands to the black cloth mask concealing its face and...
Ha.
Eustace? Surprise?
Yeah, you called it.
So do we think it was also Eustace the other night?
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't. It's been long
It's
enough
been
since
long
I
enough
saw
that-
the scene that I don't know if that tracks.
Because I
or
think
not.
Eustace wound up coming in late to that scene along with Darcy, but it's been a while long enough.
Eustace, it was you? Yes.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me Hedwig's ghost prank was actually your prank?
That's right. Eustace winced as she pulled herself to her feet. My most elaborate ever.
Evil Eustace face.
And wasn't she exactly the one that we pegged for it as well, based on the fact that she was the only one that had it? Yeah. So hey, I guess we did it. I guess there's always the chance that she heard our story and is now retroactively taking credit for someone actually threatening us, but okay.
I know you enjoy tormenting people with your practical jokes, but this was a bit much.
Hang on. I don't enjoy tormenting people.
That was terrifying. I was so confused.
Why did she say specifically cease your inquiries?
Yeah, that did not sound like a prank. That sounded like very specifically Eustace knew exactly what we were doing.
Yeah, and now was trying to play it off as a prank, right?
Yeah.
Like she was actually trying to, but also walking into the Misericorde with a whole bunch of other witnesses feels stupid. I don't know.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm struggling to put together the motivations behind why she's doing this, and like not knowing the why is bothering me here.
I was dumbfounded. Part of me was relieved to discover that the ghost I'd been seeing was not a ghost at all, but the other part of me was feeling something.
And also it makes sense because she got the goat because Darcy knows where to get a goat.
Yep.
And she's friends with Darce.
I was feeling something indescribable towards Eustace.
Indescribable how, Hedwig? Indescribable how?
Eustace, why? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Mostly because I thought it would be funny.
Rather large miscalculation there, I'm afraid.
Yeah. It really does feel like she's covering her tracks right now, but
You thought it was funny the first time.
I thought it was funny when I thought this character was something Hedwig made up. Now that I know you actually went and dressed up like a nasty devil and scared her, and now all of us, witless, I'm reevaluating.
Oh, so was Hedwig right when she told us? Did you really kill a goat?
Eustace looked at me with a cold but clearly wounded expression. No, I think that perhaps Hedwig was so overcome with shock that she, saw something in the shadows that wasn't there.
Which is true. She blazed the blade. The door closed at the same time, putting out all the torches, which we know can happen reliably and replicably.
Yep.
Right? And there was no blood on the floor afterwards. So, yeah, this feels like it was kind of like a little bit of almost a like a little teaser, like a little setup beginner mystery. Like, hey, can you figure out? And I think we were really quick at identifying Eustace here. So, bump.
Ow.
Ow. I don't know why we fist bumped like that.
Entirely reasonable, I should think. You were waving a flaming sword around according to her description. That's a point. No fire this time. Or did Hedwig imagine that too?
It seemed like a waste of oil. Not to mention, it's not good for the blade. Eustace beckoned for Adela to pass her the sword back. Adela's eyes narrowed.
Absolutely not.
Oh, come on. I'm the sacrist, after all. I gotta put it back.
I do not think this is behavior befitting a sacrist, and disrespecting Sister Catherine's sword in this manner. Shameful. We should tell the superior about this.
Yeah. You're overreacting slightly, I think.
I disagree.
Catherine with a C's sword? I was so angry that I couldn't help but blurt this thought out as soon as it entered my head. Huh?
Did you not know this, Sister Hedwig?
I scrambled to say something that would allay any suspicions. I spoke to Angela about what happened to Catherine with the sea, and she said it was the delivery man's sword.
Angela thinks she's smarter than she is, although why she would try to deceive you about that, I have no idea.
So it really was Catherine with the C's?
Well, it certainly wasn't the delivery boys. You know how much a sword costs? Especially one of that size.
Didn't we have that exact conversation? Like, is it reasonable that just a random delivery boy is walking around with a sword?
We did have that conversation.
We did have that
I
conversation,
think.
yeah. Although, now it feels weirder because now she was killed with her own sword.
Yeah.
Or if that was actually the... did we ever get confirmation if that was the murder weapon? God, I hate that it's been so long between zodes. We'll have to look at that again. But that means she either got disarmed or someone staged it with her own sword. Or cut her, killed her with something else and then...
It's actually one of that size.
So how on earth was it Catherine's with a C?
Well, it wasn't actually, hers. She just liked to borrow it from the library.
And you let her?
I refuse to be questioned on this by someone who barely knows me and didn't know her at all.
You are not in a position to act superior to anyone right now, Eustace. I don't know if we need to tell Soup, but that was not on Eustace.
Margaret, I know for a fact that you and Catherine with the C used to plan and execute far worse.
I'm innocent.
Catherine, too.
I think you should calm down, Eustace.
Margaret is immediately changing her tune here. So Eustace knows something about what Margaret got up to with Catherine with a C.
I'm sorry we didn't find this prank particularly amusing.
Yeah, immediately she's backed off. You threatened to kill poor Hedwig!
I pretended to threaten her?
Oh, well, in that case...
Remind me, Margaret, what happened to the superior before ours?
That was nothing like this, and you know it.
Superior before ours. And she's directing that comment at Margaret specifically. Aw. So the superior before the one they have now was threatened? And she... there's a lot to unpack here.
Yes, it was significantly worse.
What are you talking about? Nothing.
Is she insinuating that Margaret threatened the previous superior? Is that what she's insinuating?
It was before your time. And before Eustace's, for that matter. So she should keep it out of her mouth.
I heard enough about it. Straight from you and her.
Stop making this about me. This is about you and your stupid ghost costume. Waving a sword in Hedwig's face. Honestly, how could you? It beggars belief that you'd attempt to flip this around on anyone else.
Eustace looked around the room, but nobody offered any support. She was breathing heavily and looked as if she were about to cry. Once she was certain nobody was coming to her rescue, she focused on me.
Hedwig,
Wow. Hedwig. Leaning into your name here, huh?
I had struck her so hard that my hands stung. Eustace's face was redder than the evening's wine. I realized that I must have scraped her face with my fingernails during the swipe, as there was just a touch of blood on her cheek. I half expected her eyes to start welling up with tears, but she just stood there. Perhaps she was dumbstruck. You were cruel, Eustace. Cruel and nasty. Do you enjoy making me feel small?
Hedwig.
I instinctively raised my hand again, although this time I was held back by several of the women behind me.
Easy now.
Have you ever said anything earnest to me, Eustace? Have you ever spoken to me truthfully, even once?
Of course I have.
And how can I trust you? Ever? I tried futilely to lunge at her again, but I was not strong enough to overcome the several people gripping my arm and shoulders.
I don't know.
I don't like you.
That is fair.
Let's all calm down now, yeah?
And, yeah. Was this really just like a miscalculation on Eustace's part? Because from our interactions with her, she didn't, she was never, rude, but she seemed like maybe a little short with Hedwig. Like, she was like, I have to work in the same place as you, and, you're kind of interrupting my flow.
She also repeatedly warned us off of getting too nosy about things.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing that the apparition was warning us not to do.
Yeah.
So I wonder if this was indeed something like she thinks Hedwig's life is in danger, and this was her attempt to be like, let's get Hedwig to put the kibosh on that with my practical joke antics. And
okay, so that was actually a plausible motivation, because up for this entire time I've been trying to figure out why would she do this? Because it doesn't make sense. It's just a prank. I think we both agree she's absolutely lying that it's just a prank.
Yeah.
But also it seems like a really bad way to go about getting someone to stop doing something. If you were just wanted to threaten them, because you wouldn't just come out in front of everyone like this.
Yeah.
It seems like a way is if you're concerned about them, to get them to stop doing from something without drawing suspicion to yourself. If you were worried about them, right? Not worry them in the sense that you didn't have any actual power, but you wanted them to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you had power and wanted them to stop, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't come into a room with a group of people here and do it. You'd corner Hedwig somewhere and threaten her with an actual sword.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Huh. Yes, I think that's quite enough theater for the night.
What's going on?
Oh, is Flora still on the floor?
Probably. It is in her name.
Yep.
Tonight's outing to the Misericorde has concluded, I think. Boo. Blame Eustace, I suppose. It is getting quite late, though. I'll be getting on.
She slunk away from the group and out the door too quickly for me to object. The other women who had been holding on to me finally loosened their grips, all except for Moira, who patted me on the shoulder consolingly.
Let's get you to bed, Hedwig.
I really do think Moira would... Huh?
Let's get you to Bedwig.
Oh, I understand now.
I really do think Moira's gonna wind up being somehow involved in all this, because she sidled up to us way too quickly. I don't know. That's just hard read, but and we know she's cannier than she appears. Since she cornered Adela not once but twice in a pretty dominating fashion.
I nodded, but kept looking at Eustace. She looked pathetic. She was not openly crying, but I swear I heard a sniffle as Moira piloted me past her and out the room. The others were following suit, muttering to each other in quiet conversation. Once we were out in the hallway, I realized just how stuffy and airless the Misericorde had felt. I took in a breath of fresh air and felt a slight pang of regret. Enough to make me turn around and see if Eustace had left the room. Moira tugged me away quickly.
I think that's enough for tonight. I
don't know. I think I should apologize.
Well, you can do that tomorrow. Right now, what I think you need is some rest.
I hit her quite hard.
As well you should have, if I'm being frank. What a horrible practical joke.
There was a slight twinkling sound as her foot collided with the empty tincture bottle I had left on my bed earlier.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, no, it's my fault. Must have fallen off the bed.
What was in it?
Fallen off the bed. Was someone in her room?
Maybe so.
She shut the door behind her and sat me down on my bed, just like she had on my first day out of my cell. Nothing, not anymore, at least. Something Darcy gave me earlier.
Best to be careful drinking anything Darcy gives you.
It was actually rather helpful. She said it would give me confidence.
Well, we'll have to tell her it was a rousing success, won't we?
We both chuckled.
What a day,
Yeah, quite a day. I smiled weakly at her for a moment, but I couldn't maintain the charade for long. I burst into tears. Moira made a sympathetic cooing sound and put her hands on my shoulders. I shrugged them off quickly. I had had quite enough of people attempting to restrain me for one night. Instead, she offered me the front of her robe for me to dry my eyes on, which I did accept.
There. I think this was all a bit too much for you in one go, perhaps.
Is it always like this? It feels like the whole abbey just fell apart. And it's all my fault.
Well, this definitely wasn't one of our better nights, but no, I can think of worse.
Really?
Don't forget someone died not too long ago. I think that might still top you having a little too much to drink, don't you?
Silly me.
But even so, we have some colorful personalities here. It's not the first time we've had a minor clash.
But I hit her. I had no idea I was even capable of. I'm a freak. I never should have left my cell.
Marta's stronger than she looks, you know. She's clapped Flora on the cheek more times than I can count. And I'm sure she'll smack Adela one of these days if they keep arguing about the sherry.
Explains why Flora doesn't like her much.
Oh.
And, well, I think Darcy's gotten into it with Catherine before. Although that might just have been under the influence of a particularly bad mushroom.
That doesn't count.
The details are different, but I'll be honest with you. I think people mostly remember the boiling over, not what was in the pot.
Still.
Would you believe that I've gotten slapped a few times?
What? Why? She chuckled again and leaned down to give me a kiss on the forehead. So condescending.
Now, I'm happy to gossip, but I think I have the right to withhold gossip about myself. Wouldn't you agree?
I suppose that makes sense.
You can ask Eustace about it, I'm sure. Maybe that's a good way to start mending that bridge. Or you could ask Angela. I'm sure she'd have a particularly dramatic version to share.
I groaned into her robe. Oh dear, I have to work with Eustace.
We all have to work together, Hedwig.
How? In the same room. It's going to be horrible.
You'll find a way. We always do.
She gently tugged her robe away from me. There was an embarrassingly soggy patch on her chest, visible even on the black fabric in the dim moonlight.
I'll see you at service tomorrow?
Of course. Yeah.
Good. Get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. I promise.
She made to leave. When she opened the door, I could hear Angela commenting to her from the landing.
It would seem I left just before things got interesting. Yes, well, there's always next time.
She shut the door behind her, and their conversation became too muffled to focus on. I collapsed onto the bed, spread-eagled, and half-heartedly attempted to get into it properly.
Moira actually seems on good terms with Angela. That was a pretty cordial interaction.
Yeah.
Huh.
I stared at the ceiling, unsure what to do. It was late, but there was absolutely no chance I was going to fall asleep anytime soon. Something felt wrong inside of me. Despite Moira's assurances that I could continue as usual, I felt as if I had just stepped across a threshold equally as dramatic as the one I had crossed when I left my cell. Eustace's cruel joke had thrown so much of the past few weeks into question, but nonetheless, I felt a bit ill. I rubbed the hand that I had struck her cheek with. I could still feel the sting lingering.
The what?
The stingering.
I see.
She had terrified me. Not just me, but the entire room full of women. For what? All the services, some hazing ritual?
I think we're committed. Barring further evidence, I think we're gonna stick with she's trying to warn Hedwig off of it, but is not herself culpable. She is legitimately worried. for Hedwig's safety if she continues going after this.
Yep.
And thinks this is the best way to do it.
Superior had warned everyone about that. I realized that she would have only mentioned it if it had been a problem prior. Perhaps this was typical. Perhaps I was unaccustomed to the space I now occupied, unprepared for how adversarial and mean-spirited it was. As it was. There was no denying that over the past few weeks, and tonight especially, I have observed a community on the rocks. It wasn't just Eustace and I. It was Angela and Catherine with a K, Adela and Charity, Flora and, well, everyone else. Those weren't the only conflicts either. All in all, it seemed that this place was a kind of nexus of misery and resentment. I was restless. Sighing deeply, I got up off the bed and quietly crept to my door. There was no conversation emanating from any of the rooms or the hallway. It seemed as if everyone had succeeded where I could not. I did my best to stay silent as I collected a pricket from the mantel and lit the candle in the fireplace, headed out for a stroll. It was quite cold out now. I thanked God for my cozy robes. The thick woolen fabric did an admirable job of protecting me from the elements, and I could ball up the extra fabric of my oversized sleeve to keep my free hand warm. I wandered back and forth across the landing a few times. I was a lot more confident spending my time alone outside now that Eustace had outed herself as my mysterious stalker. I descended the stairs nearest the dorms and did a few slow laps at the cloister, deep in thought. Should I tell the superior? I felt uneasy about this. Margaret and a few others had seemed to balk at Adela's idea of involving her. Then again, I would have to report to her sooner or later. It would be hard to pretend nothing had happened. Especially since I had not even gotten the answer from Catherine that I had promised to make my priority. Well, it had not been for a lack of trying. Perhaps I could corner Catherine before service tomorrow. She hadn't seemed unwilling to talk at all, just unwilling to do it in the company of others, which I could understand. On the other hand, what if Eustace had handed me the evidence I needed anyway? Who else could have beheaded someone but the woman with access to that sword? How cavalier Eustace had been with her threats, too.
Cease your meddling.
In retrospect, Eustace's attempt at a booming, authoritative voice had been a little unconvincing. And swept up in the moment, I suppose. Nonetheless, her threats seemed quite targeted. Not the first time Eustace had advised me to keep my nose clean. Took a turn out of the cloister and into the paths between the mostly unused rooms and buildings the superior had led me past on the way to the hospitalum. The brisk night air was doing something helpful for my thoughts, at the very least, and I wanted to stretch my legs further. Eustace controlled access to the sword. There was no doubt about that.
And yeah, this is our reasoning from earlier.
Thinking more on the situation, was there really any other reason needed to finger her as the perpetrator? Catherine had been beheaded, and the wretched tool had been left in the cloister as an ill omen. I had no idea why Eustace would want to kill Catherine with a C, but was that my responsibility to find out?
We already mentioned a different way this could have played out, and probably much more plausible.
Mm-hmm.
It was said that Catherine with a C kept at borrowing it and was allowed to do so.
Yeah.
She probably had it on her when she was killed.
Yep.
Right? I have my doubts that it was even the murder weapon.
And even if it was, she'd have no reason that we know of to suspect that she was going to be killed by someone else within the abbey.
Yeah.
So why would she even... If she had the sword and was fucking around, she'd happily hand it over to someone else and let them fuck around with it for a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it's more reasonable to assume that Eustace would have given the sword to Catherine earlier in that day as Catherine asked for it. Right?
And then whoops.
Yeah. I think Hedwig is going down the wrong track here.
I also wonder if this might explain why... I don't know if this explains or not why Angela would have lied and said it was the boy's sword, because Eustace, I doubt, after the murder, I doubt Eustace would have been like, yeah, it's my fault, I let the sword out of there.
So you think Eustace spread the story that it was the Traveler's sword and Angela picked that up?
That's one possible explanation, but
Wouldn't
I don't know
people
if that
recognize it if it was
tracks.
the same one Catherine was using, though?
They sure seem to.
Yeah.
But how connected is the soup?
So you think Angela's doing it to save Eustace?
No. I don't think Angela has any idea what the fuck is going on to the extent that she thinks she does.
Oh, Angela's out of the loop enough that... Right, okay, I see. Okay.
And also, I don't know that I think this at all. I was just wondering,
No,
does
that's-
this potentially explain it?
Yeah, that's not an unreasonable little yarn to spin there. I had no... Oh, hold on. I had no idea why Eustace would want to kill Catherine with a C, but was that my responsibility to find out? You can't neglect the heart, Hedwig. You can't neglect the heart.
Yep.
I had been charged with finding Catherine's killer. Catherine with a C had been killed with a sword. The one sword of the Abbey resided under lock and key, a key that Eustace controlled. What else was there to it? As I wandered the path toward the outer wall of the Abbey, I became surer and surer of this line of reasoning. Why did the why matter? I was not here to judge. I thought about Flora. If Eustace was to be found guilty and handed over to the diocese, maybe the clouds surrounding the Abbey would part.
Oh, is Eustace going to be the next one to die?
Yeah.
That would be the poetic way to go about it, right?
Yep.
Maybe she could be happy. I thought about Catherine with a K. Something was weighing on her, and it was clearly something to do with the night of Catherine II's death. Had she seen something? Was she simply too afraid to speak? She certainly left in a hurry after Eustace's little stunt backfired. This too might be resolved as Eustace was found to be the guilty one. I reached the end of the courtyard and stood in the shadow of the crumbling outer wall. Goodness, they really should have built a gate here. Anyone could come into the Abbey from this direction if they braved the hill and the cold. It could have been anyone. And yet, the longer I turned things over in my head, the more I thought about the ghost stories people had told earlier in the evening. That cloud of negativity. Maybe it really was a haunting. Eustace had been dressing up as my ghost, but what about Flora's? Adela's? Was every ghost story here a tale born of Eustace's mean streak? I found that hard to believe, as much as that astounded me. Demons and devils, they infested this place. I saw a light in the distance. My heart dropped out of my chest. I scrambled ahead through the open archway in the wall, desperate to see what was out there on the moorland this late at night. The rolling hillocks made it difficult to get a good look from my position. I did my best to quietly hop and sprint forward, keeping myself in as high a position on the rolling field as I could. The light ahead of me kept dipping out of sight. And finally, I got close enough to get a good look at their shape. They were taking the same route the Superior and I had traveled the other day. I froze. The traveler had not seen me, but they were liable to at any moment if they happened to look over their shoulder.
I don't think Hedwig would have... Was anyone eavesdropping when we were talking with Catherine? I don't think she would have even brought it up if she didn't have the privacy. Is this Catherine with a K?
Maybe.
Looking back on it, the intelligent choice would have been for me to turn back to the Abbey right away, wake the Superior up, and catch Eustace. I was assuming, in whatever duplicitous act she was up to. Not Eustace. But perhaps through a mixture of wine and whatever Darcy had given me earlier in the evening, I was not acting intelligently. Not to mention the sheer rush of shock I was feeling at that moment. I followed her. It was not easy. It was quite cold out, and even in the moonlight, I had to rely on my candle to watch my footing.
Wouldn't that immediately give you away? Like, the moment they turn around, they see, like, an artificial light out in the middle of the evening.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yep.
That's what she said a couple screens back.
A strong gust of wind could have extinguished my light, but mercifully it survived the whole trip. What would I have done if she turned around? I can't say for sure. I presume I would have blown the candle out and run straight backwards.
Okay, so yeah, you're right, yeah.
After an agonizingly long walk, we arrived at the hospitalum. My heart was pounding out of my chest. The figure ahead of me broke left and around to the back door that the Superior and I had taken down to the lower level of the building.
I get, if it's not Catherine, the only other person who would think to go here at this point in time would be someone who had been in the Misericorde when we asked her the question.
Yep.
and might have overheard or eavesdropped unknowing to Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that limits our suspects here.
My first impulse was to watch through the small window I had seen at the top of the dungeon, but I realized how obvious that would be if either of them happened to look up. I blew up my candle just to make sure I was invisible. Another part of me wanted to simply tackle the mystery nun on the stairs before she could get to James, demand to know what she was doing out here. But, I reasoned, it would likely be more useful to hear what they were going to talk about. Were threats going to be made? Would I learn some earth-shattering secret that would illuminate the conspiracy I was working to unfold? I stood close to the window as I could while feeling reasonably out of sight. This, frustratingly, made it impossible to see what was happening. I was hopeful the sound would carry, but I spoke quietly, and the echo made it impossible to discern anything meaningful.
And of course, we know Hedwig can't discern voices.
Mm-hmm.
I could at least make out the tenor of the conversation was calm. I had been worried that I was about to overhear an intense argument or violent threats, but whatever James and his mystery liaison had to say to each other never rose above a dull whisper. I wanted very, very badly to take a peek through the little window, but the moonlight was such that anyone passing in front of the opening would be supremely obvious. The conversation had grew quieter, and I became worried that they had grown suspicious. Eventually, I made out a sigh of resignation. I suddenly realized that if the conversation came to a close while I was still here, I'd have to follow the person I was spying on back to the abbey, as I was now out of candlelight. Did not want to further risk being caught following this person. I crept away from the wall I had been pressed up against, and then began to sprint back toward the abbey. I hoped anyway. It was very dark outside. There was enough moonlight to see the general shape of the ground in front of me, but little else. I ran as I had never ran in my entire life. I was out of breath quickly, and soon after that I could feel a sharp pinching pain in my side. I stopped every now and then to collect myself, making sure not to change direction on accident. I didn't even know if I had started running in the right direction. I just knew that further adjustment would surely result in disaster. I had never run like this before, and it was making me aware of muscles and bones I had never realized existed. My inner thighs felt stretched and ready to snap. My chest grew tight. Whenever I pushed myself particularly hard, that pinching pain returned harder with a pulsing rhythm I could feel under my skin, as if lute strings inside me were being plucked. Bodies are truly disgusting things, aren't they? Miraculously, it seems I had aimed true. I could see the abbey walls ahead of me. I had veered a little somewhere along the route, but not as significantly as I had feared. I slowed my sprint to a canter, and then eventually to a limping walk. I made it through the archway I had walked through earlier, and then my knees gave out. I fell to the ground, completely exhausted. I rolled into the grass next to me and attempted to get to my feet, but I was spent. I retched a few times.
I'm so glad this game has a retching sound effect. Thank you for that.
Groaning, I made it up to all fours. Black bile spilled out of my mouth and into the grass with another heave. I realized that it was mostly wine I was expelling. Sore and sickly, I was truly pathetic to behold. I could feel my body giving up. I struggled to remain awake. I couldn't just pass out here, but... Yeah, you gotta see who it is when they come back.
Whoops. Ha. Ha ha.
We were right.
Yep.
We were right.
Hedwig, what are you doing out here?
I scrambled to my feet. Catherine with a K was standing in the archway looking concerned. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk around the abbey. I must have pushed myself too hard.
Goodness. Do you need any help?
She was smiling, but she looked rather peculiar. She held her hands behind her back, a rigid pose I'd never seen her stand in before.
What did she get from James? She's got something with her, right?
Maybe.
No. Thank you, though.
I see. Well, have a good night.
Catherine? What were you doing?
The same thing as you were, of course. I can never sleep after a night of Misericorde drama.
What did you and James talk about? I felt a surge of bravery. We were alone and it was the middle of the night. She could not weasel out of this one.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Catherine, please. She sighed deeply.
Listen, you must promise not to tell anyone about this. How do you know about James, anyway?
I asked the superior to introduce us. Since I was replacing Catherine II as a chronicler, I wanted to know what I was stepping into. He told me that he didn't kill her. And then he told me that you could vouch for him.
Ah.
We stood in silence for a moment.
And you believe him?
I do.
And what do you stand to gain from helping him exactly?
It just seems like the right thing to do. I wouldn't want to occupy a position I had lingering questions about. Catherine nodded, looking less confident than I'd ever seen her.
Very well, I can certainly tell you he did not kill her.
Really? How?
He
mentioned something about his tunic.
What did he tell you?
She is really reluctant to give out more than she needs to here, isn't she?
I wonder if
James someone that she knew from before she was sent here?
I was wondering if it was either that or if James was her lover.
Yeah, or
and
something.
it's like, that's why she'd know where the traveling cloak is, because the traveling cloak was in her bed.
Yeah, something like that. Although, yeah, that could be it.
That was more or less the whole of it. I was trying to ask you for details in the Misericorde, but...
Well, I know he was not wearing a tunic when Catherine II was found.
How?
Because he was with me.
Yep.
And he didn't slip away?
No, I'm quite sure of that.
Where were you?
In my dormitory
Read
room.
like a fucking book.
Really? Why?
Hedwig, this is humiliating enough. Please don't make me say it.
What? I'm confused.
Oh my goodness. This would be precious if I didn't feel so, well, mortified.
All I could offer her in response was a blank expression.
Hedwig, James and I we had a relationship.
Ooh. You hear the beat just immediately
yeah.
kick in there? Hold on, what's this song? Scandal. Oh, scandal with an exclamation point.
A physical relationship.
A very physical relationship. Not an intimate one, a physical one. Sorry, we've been playing through ID and that joke is living rent-free in my mind still.
I know he did not kill Catherine because we had been fucking. Is that conclusive enough for you? Is that what you wanted to hear? Hedwig? Hedwig, are you?
My energy had finally dried up completely. My knees gave way. I saw a smear of stars and then black.
Hedwig.
Huh?
There she is, thank goodness. Thank you for your assistance, Moira.
Why is Moira here?
I don't know.
Thank you for your assistance.
What happened?
I was on a walk to the privy and found you passed out on the path.
Huh? Wait, no,
Oh dear, she's still delirious. I'm beginning to worry the thin mountain air isn't very good for her. Do we have any dried fruit around here? Yes.
How did Moira find us? I don't understand how she entered into this.
So, here's a thought. What if Moira was the one in the Misericorde that Catherine was worried about and didn't want to talk in front of? And in involving Moira in this person she thinks is the culprit or part of another faction or whatever, it gives it plausible deniability. Like, no, we definitely weren't out there going to visit James and then sharing secrets. It's Catherine rushes in to Moira's room and is like, I just found Hedwig passed out. Help me get her up. Take her to the
because
superior.
that paints it like something else and not related to that because she wouldn't want to get her involved. The other thought I had was that Moira happened to be following Hedwig.
Yeah, that's also possible.
Right? She even mentioned like what would happen if I turned around and looked and she didn't answer. Just like,
Yep.
like, what if Hedwig had turned around and looked, huh?
Yep.
I was laying on the floor in the superior's office. Moira and Catherine were standing above me, both looking concerned. Moira most especially. Catherine's concerns, it seemed, went beyond my well-being.
Do you remember what happened before you fainted, Hedwig?
Catherine and I were talking and...
No, that was after I found you. Moira, I'm quite worried about this.
Hedwig, take a hint.
The
superior returned with a small wooden bowl. Moira plucked a small dried berry from it and crouched down to feed it to me.
Something sweet might help at least. So, you were on a walk, Hedwig. You look exhausted.
Yeah, I was unable to sleep.
Sleep deprived, of course. That explains the confusion. Yes.
Moira is definitely not buying this, but
Yes, it would.
yeah.
Thank God you went to the privy when you did, Catherine. I don't particularly love that phrasing, but yes.
The berry Moira had given me was definitely sweet and delicious, although I wasn't really sure how that helped. Nonetheless, I was lucid enough to understand that Catherine with a K was signaling to me that the information that she had shared with me was not something she wanted discussed in front of Moira and the superior. Begrudgingly, I played along. Yeah, yes, I remember now. I was restless after what happened to Misericorde, and I went for a walk to clear my head. I think I probably had too much to drink.
Oh dear. What happened in the Misericorde? Nothing you'd need worry yourself with, Superior. Just our typical womanly exploits.
The superior sighed but did not push the subject.
Well, thank you, Catherine, at any rate. God only knows what could have happened to poor Hedwig if you hadn't found her. And thank you, Moira, for being on hand to help her. Ha! Oh, yep.
Oh.
It's your theory.
Yep.
Moira was out following people around.
She absolutely.
I was on my way to the privy as well when Catherine found me.
Yeah, she continues to be the single most suspicious person in how hard she's trying to ingratiate herself to us and how very much she wants to be in our orbit and like positioning herself very specifically as the person helping us whenever she can. She also, I remember from one of the first couple episodes, she knows exactly what we're doing. And it was immediately after she learned what we were doing that she kind of became this kind of person that's like trying to get into our orbit and get in our good graces. I fully believe right now that Moira is not the guilty party, but knows more about what's going on and has a reason to want us not to get closer to the truth.
Yep. What luck. A strange but welcome miracle. Well, I see no reason for you all to be crowding my floor at this late hour. Off to bed with you, all of you. Of course.
I was pulled to my feet by my would-be saviors and guided toward the door.
Oh, and Hedwig, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate you checking in tomorrow after service, just so I can confirm that you're well.
Yes, Superior. Once through the door, I was able to move with my own strength. I was sore all over, but I could walk at the very least. The three of us walked in silence through the cloister toward the stairs to the dorms. Moira let out a lilting chuckle at one point, and I could hear Catherine with a K exhale wearily through her nose. I had a half a mind to slap Catherine with a K the way I did Eustace. Not sure I could ever look at her the same way again. I felt ashamed to be protecting her dirty little secret for her, and even more ashamed that I had seemingly instinctually agreed to do so. What was this place turning me into? I realized I was still carrying the pricket, looped around one of my fingers. a stretch so thin that I had not thought about the whole walk back. I placed it back on the mantle when we arrived at the dormitory.
Well, good night. Good night, Moira.
How far back does our history go right now? Not far
Why?
enough. I was just wondering about like a detail with the pricket. Like, did she did she pick it off of a stack when she got it at first, and now it's placing it back on the bare mantle? Something like some other indicator that Moira was out following, or someone was out following us. But
Another detail that I was wondering if we'd need to use in this scene, but didn't, but I bet will come up later.
yep.
Catherine brought up that her door is the one that makes a noise when it opens.
When did she make that one? Or when did she bring that up? I do not.
We were in the Misericorde, and when Hedwig wanted to ask stuff, and Catherine was drunkenly babbling about the various things that she thought Hedwig was going to confront her about, that was one of them. My door is bothering you, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'll get it fixed. Oh, it's the cat. No, that's not my cat.
Oh, you're right. That's really good to know.
So if we hear something late at night, and then have to figure out whether someone was out of their room, we know who it was. If we don't
Either
hear
Catherine
it,
is out of her room or someone was visiting her.
yeah, and if we don't hear it, then we know that's not someone going in or out of Catherine's room.
That's fascinating.
That's at least a thought. It could just be a random irrelevant detail, but mystery
It was
brain.
a particularly because it's not just like if Hedwig listens, like she could hear doors opening and closing. It's like it like whines, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. Okay.
Yes. Good night, you two, and thank you. We were all speaking in low whispers so as not to wake anyone else.
Don't mention it, silly. I actually would appreciate it if you truly didn't mention it. If Flora or Margaret hears about this, I'll never hear the end of it.
Mention.
The evidently miraculous convergence of Moira and I's bodily needs. Privy humor is the lowest of the low. Naturally, Flora finds it uproarious. Shh.
We split up and went to our separate dorms. Catherine with the K had to open and close hers with great care as it was still creaking terribly.
Yeah.
I sighed and collapsed face first into my bed. I didn't even have the energy to undress, and I was asleep before I hit the pillow. I dreamed of soldiers chasing me with pikes.
It's a weirdly specific thing to dream about. Soldiers chasing me with pikes. For why?
And why are they threatening her with fish?
Stop this.
No.
Stop this. Really? You got a chance to make a polearm joke and you don't rise to the occasion?
I awoke feeling even worse than when I had fallen into bed. The soreness in my body had escalated into stiffness. I groaned aloud as soon as I realized I was no longer sleeping.
Aw, Bappy's first hangover.
I would take my chances with the armies in my dreams. I could hear people shuffling outside my door. I was somewhat surprised that I had even managed to wake up at my usual hour, considering how late I had been up and how exhausted I felt. It was all I could do to roll off the bed and stumble out of my room to join everyone for service. I could barely stay awake through the whole thing, which made me feel wretched. I had already forgone praying the full set of the hours. If I could not even make it through these compromised services, then who was I?
Hedwig,
Yeah, it didn't take her long to fall out of that habit.
how are you feeling?
How on earth could she be so chipper after a night like ours? Fading, I must admit. She giggled and offered me a sympathetic expression. I gave her a perfunctory smile back and took off in the direction of the superior's office for a requested meeting. I made it there before the superior did. She was a few minutes behind me. No doubt the last to leave the chapel.
Goodness, Hedwig, you know you can always skip morning service if you feel ill.
I'm quite all right. She unlocked the door and ushered me inside hastily.
So,
Yes, your superior?
I do hope that you have some news for me, even with your little tumble.
Yes, as a matter of fact. She nodded with faint approval and urged me to sit down. I did so gratefully, and she, in turn, sat in her grand chair. I was able to ask Catherine with a K about the tunic. Indeed, she can vouch for James.
Well, that's fantastic news. What did she say? How did you approach the subject?
As the evening wore on, things got looser and looser. I simply asked the question at an opportune time. In my head, I was navigating through a thick fog. I was unsure of how much information to divulge to the superior to spare her the embarrassment of hearing it, and me the embarrassment of having to say it.
Is that all? You seem a little worse for wear. I heard whispers of things getting rather heated.
How so?
Well, Angela was in here complaining about something or other at one point.
Yes, there was a bit of a kerfuffle at one point.
I see. She finds making friends rather difficult, I am aware. Is that all?
Nothing relevant. No.
She raised an eyebrow.
No, that's actually not true, but Eustace knocked on the door at one point later in the evening dressed as a ghost and waggled a sword at me in some sort of mean-spirited joke. Then I slapped her across the face quite hard, and then I think Flora might have been plotting to run away, which would be horrible. Have to help her see reason. And then after the evening fell apart, I couldn't sleep and I went for a walk to clear my head, but I saw someone walking toward the hospitalum and I followed them, and it was Catherine with a K, and I heard her talking to James, but I couldn't quite hear what they were talking about. And then I ran all the way back to the dark and collapsed on the path. And then Catherine with a K found me, and that's when I really asked her about it, and she admitted it. The thing about the tunics, she said she saw him that day without one, and
Hedwig, you didn't need to be this much of a cop. Both of the superior's eyebrows were raised now.
Well.
And then
Yes?
I realized I was panting. Nothing. I'm sorry, I got carried away. That's everything.
So Catherine spoke with James in the middle of the night. How odd. I fear that this does not allay my suspicions.
No?
He claims Catherine can vouch for him about this tunic of his that is supposedly able to clear his name. But if they are conspiring in secret, how do I know the whole idea wasn't simply concocted out of thin air?
I suppose there's no way of knowing that.
I applaud your investigation work, but I'm afraid this puts us right back where we started. Not without further corroboration, anyway. As it is, this is tainted testimony at best.
I had a strong suspicion that Catherine with the K had been telling the whole truth to me last night. She'd been very reluctant to speak on it, and her strong hints in this very office that the embarrassing truth was my secret to keep did not feel like they were part of some grander lie. Surely if that was the case, she would be spreading the lie farther afield, but I couldn't bring myself to tell the superior. It was embarrassing. It was based entirely on personal feelings, and if by some small chance Catherine with the K was capable of murder, I would not want to make myself her next target.
Tainted testimony in particular, given Catherine's circumstances. Unless there's another detail here that makes you find this story more believable.
I had reneged on my promise to keep Catherine with a K to not speak a word of the night's events to anyone else's already. But something else was keeping me from sharing the final, perhaps critical element of her story. I felt dirty just thinking about it, and I did not want to even imagine what Catherine with a K might do if she suspected I had blabbered about her liaisons with James. Especially, I remember with a shiver, while she still had access to a sword. Even if she was innocent of Catherine with the C's murder, I worried I might become her victim if I used this information against her.
Hedwig, tomorrow I would like you to travel to the village with some companions.
These words felt like a bucket of cold water. The village?
Indeed. Do not worry. As I said, you will not be alone. I realize it will be a new experience.
Catherine with a K will be included, I presume?
Goodness, no. Moira and Eustace, that would be fine.
Not Eustace, please.
Now, we can't have you two falling out over this. You must work together. I'm sure I do not need to remind you that you must maintain a healthy relationship with everyone.
Must I?
Of course. For heaven's sakes. Don't complain, it's not that often someone gets to go down to the village. A trip out with Eustace might do both of you some good. get some fresh air with your compatriots, and commiserate over a change of scenery. It was not that long ago. She was in here speaking quite highly of you, I might add.
Well, what is it we would be doing in the village?
There are people there who would be able to provide some insight into how seriously we should take James and Catherine's insistence. Goodness, it's a shame you weren't able to hear what they were talking about. It would save us a lot of time.
I weighed my options. As stressful as it was to imagine, I decided that a trip beyond the bounds of the abbey would be preferable to risking Catherine's rage. Besides, the superior seemed quite adamant about the idea. I shouldn't have followed her in the first place.
I certainly wouldn't have suggested it, but it was brave of you. You're beginning to think on your feet. Perhaps the chess lessons, the chessons, if you will, are helping.
Quite possibly.
Anyhow, knowing that Catherine and James are in communication complicates things, but perhaps we can glean some idea of whether she knows something and is helping James out of guilt, or if something more sinister is going on.
Why does it have to be those two options? Why not just are innocent? I'm afraid I don't follow.
Hedwig, do you not know why Catherine left the comfort of the village?
She did mention it last night in the Misericorde, something about local politics. She offended the wrong person or something like that. The superior let out a surprising chortle.
I see. Well, I suppose that is not untrue. Still, I am rather surprised. I would have expected the rumors around her to be one of the first things you heard.
What rumors?
That Sister Catherine murdered her husband.
Oh!
Oh!
We had tossed around some guesses about that. I think we guessed that maybe she was gay.
Yep.
Right? But they hate to see a girl boss winning.
Yeah.
I nearly choked on air. What? The superior held up a hand gently.
I do not believe it for an instant, to be clear. In fact, I think it's very likely that this is precisely the kind of story the people she expressed contempt for would concoct to harm her reputation. She was in a competitive business, you understand, or rather her husband was.
I tried my very best to keep up with the conversation, although my throat felt bone dry. It was difficult to get the words out. And what was that?
The vineyard, of course. You might see it on your way down the mountain. It's a particularly good one, I might add, at least for this country. All of our wine uses grapes from the slopes of Lynbarrow.
So you think her husband just died and she was blamed?
I have no proof, but it's more believable than her killing someone. But this is Sister Catherine we're talking about. The Sister Catherine of a few years ago, at least. No. Her story is that the man fell down the stairs and some unscrupulous hawk saw an opportunity to stop her from inheriting a fortune.
So in the village...
Speak with the townsfolk. I'm curious how they feel about Catherine now. Perhaps there is a pattern we have overlooked.
I thought you believed Catherine with a K. Surely this is a waste of time?
I do believe that Catherine is innocent of murdering her husband, but I must confess it is purely a gut feeling. Poke around for me, see if there's any evidence to support that claim. It would be good to show the bishop some support from a source who is not also accused of a similar crime.
You're worried about Catherine and James. You're worried that they're conspiring. You think they might have killed her, what, together?
Thanks to your intrepid investigation last night, we can no longer rely solely on them vouching for each other. We have a responsibility to follow up on their connection, no matter how I feel. Perhaps I've been played for a fool. We'll concoct a simple cover story for your visit, bringing some finished wine or other goods down to share, perhaps.
My heart sank. I just put Catherine with a K in harm's way, it seemed. Although perhaps I was in harm's way around Catherine with a K. This was all too much to keep in my head at once. Just say it, a voice inside my head murmured. Just tell the superior that Catherine has been... What should I ask? Who should I speak to?
Just speak to whomever will give you their time. Bring the topic up carefully and just get a sense.
A sense?
A sense. Anyway...
That is the least helpful set of instructions I've ever heard.
This is good. We are making progress. You are doing quite well for yourself, I must say. You're quite resourceful.
Thank you. But does Eustace really have to come with us if I'm to go on this village trip?
As I said, it sounds like an opportunity to mend whatever bridge between you has already broken. I see no reason to keep you apart.
All I could do was sigh. I was pouting just a little, I will admit.
I will meet you halfway. I shall send the word to both Moira and Eustace for you, so you will be spared at least one awkward conversation. Fair enough?
Thank you. She sighed and rested her chin on her hand.
Sometimes I wonder how I manage. It sounds like you could pen a whole book about the drama happening beneath my station this week alone. I look forward to reading your chronicles one day.
It's not so bad.
So I thought until, well,
She made a cutting gesture across her neck with a grim expression on her face.
I used to think it was good to let these things be and let the sisters sort things out amongst themselves, but could I have prevented Catherine's murder if I had taken a more active interest in the whispers that would stop after I turned the corner?
Surely I don't know.
I do not like meddling, and now circumstances have conspired such that I must meddle greatly through you. Alas.
I had noticed the faintest whiff of wine on her breath as she exhaled a deep sigh.
I'm afraid I am in no state for chess this morning. Have a productive rest of your day, Sister Hedwig.
She was drinking already? I guess that doesn't mean anything. You drink wine instead of water because you can't drink the water.
I stood up from my chair and clasped my hands together, holding them out half-heartedly. Thank you, Mother Superior. I will endeavor to do so. She nodded and beckoned to the door.
And we've already talked about why we don't believe the Superior is involved in this, right?
Yeah, it'd be weird. What would
Not
the
just
purpose
it would
of
be
this
weird,
be?
it would actively compromise whatever she had going on. If she was involved, this would have been a perfect out, right? You've already got someone who's blamed for it. Everyone else is going along with the story. She could have gone along with that and saved herself that, right? I don't necessarily know that we have to believe her own reasoning that she believes in justice here, but I don't think she would have us looking into this if she was guilty or adjacent to it, right? Because then that just comes back on herself. So while I think that maybe she's not being forthright with us about her real motivations here, I do think that what she's asking us to do is her legitimately trying to get closer to what the truth is. At least that much. Yeah, that's it. Just thinking about what she was having us do and why, and I'm like, is there,
I left swiftly. I could feel the pressure building in my head, beginning to match the aching of my body. I groaned aloud and rolled my head around my shoulders. It was a lovely morning, at least. A wispy cloud of fog had settled over the grass in the cloister, and sunbeams reflected out of it at pleasing angles as I walked past.
Hedwig, dear, good morning.
Marta and Charity were seated in a wooden chairs at the edge of the grass, looking perfectly relaxed. I smiled wearily and waved at Marta, who beckoned to be closer.
In trouble, were we?
Huh? No. The Superior just wanted to report on how I was feeling. I fainted last night on my way to the privy.
Oh dear, we had quite a night, didn't we?
Charity's been telling me all about it.
There was a dark glint in her eye that I did not altogether appreciate. I feel ashamed.
Don't be. Lord knows I've wanted to smack Eustace more than once. She can be a pompous little thing, and she deserves it for scaring you girls witless. Still, I didn't know you had it in you, nor her for that matter.
I had no idea either. I've never struck anyone before. I abhor violence.
Don't we all until it suits us. Just try not to make a habit of it, because I'm better at it.
She says as if she never did.
My fighting days are behind me, I'm afraid.
I was gonna say, she's missing an eye, so we haven't learned yet how that happened, but I choose to believe the most badass explanation possible.
Yeah. It is much more difficult to bring people upright with only harsh words. I've tried hitting some sense into these women, and it hasn't taken.
I think I'm beginning to understand why Flora doesn't like hanging out with you.
I've tried pleading with them about the virtues of living well, and it never stuck. I am afraid, then, that I must instead simply appeal to your good nature, Hedwig. I don't want you to end up like Catherine.
Oh, goodness. I apologize for offending you.
Oh, you didn't. She didn't, did she, Marta?
No, not at all. I'm just reminded of Catherine's flirtations with that particular kind of apologia. Nobody really abhors violence.
Oh, so Catherine was of a similar mind, huh?
I failed to turn the other cheek, as it were.
As I would have as well in your position. Oh, Marta, you're just in one of your moods.
I am starting to realize that I have been in one of my moods since Catherine was taken from us, and I'm not sure I will ever fully recover.
As if that's your fault.
Was it not? I gave up on her. Her gift for persuasion was too much for me. I let her get away with too much. Catherine's silver tongue stayed my hand too often. Do you remember when she locked Flora in that box?
Oh my, yes.
What happened?
One day I went down to the cellars a little early, and I heard an alarming racket coming from one of the crates we use for packing wine bottles. I opened the lid, and what do I find inside? Poor little Flora, gasping for air, curled up so tight I had to enlist 2 sisters to help pull her out.
What? It was a very strange morning.
Flora, of course, would say nothing. She was very loyal to Catherine. Catherine, though, confessed to everything almost immediately. She admitted that it was all a practical joke that had gone too far, and that she hadn't known that the lid was too tight to let air in.
Is that? That doesn't seem like, from how people have described Catherine with a C, that doesn't seem like something.
Yeah.
She was all about from how people have described her, she seemed more about uplifting people and getting them to check things out, try new things rather than playing mean jokes. I wonder if she's taking credit for this because did Flora go down and overhear something, get locked in there, and Catherine was like, oh, I don't want you to, accidentally get close to whatever you overheard that I was doing.
Could be.
I don't know, I've got conspiracy brain going on.
Why on earth would she think to put Flora in there in the first place?
Only God knows. Flora adored Catherine, and they at least shared a wicked sense of humor.
Was Flora all right?
Oh, she was beside herself for a day or two.
And took it out on me, if you can believe it.
Goodness.
Catherine thought, or knew, I suppose, that she could get away with anything.
Why did she confess so quickly then?
That's a good point. Why did she, Marta?
You see, even in death, she can bargain her way out of scrutiny. She didn't admit to anything because she felt ashamed. She admitted it because she had already gotten away with it. Flora had been found safely. No harm was done in Catherine's eyes. Another lesson avoided. Off she went on her merry way with nothing but a minute's awkward conversation as penance.
I think you're being a mite too harsh.
Who would punish her? Not the superior. Lord knows nobody would break the unspoken agreements to cut her out of our affairs that Catherine orchestrated. Interesting. So Catherine is the reason why the soup is not included in anything.
The soup isn't in the loop.
Yeah. Would I punish her? I should have, but no. It was too late by then. I was already under her spell.
Punishing her wouldn't change what happened to her.
Would it not? I don't know. I don't believe in random chance. All flowers were seeds sown. I could have shaped her into something great. Instead, I gave up trying. Catherine is my greatest failure.
I know you don't mean all that. I know you miss her.
I do. Despite it all, I do.
Charity had started getting glassy-eyed. Marta reached over to touch her plump wrist with her own bony fingers. No getting wistful in front of poor Hedwig. Sure, she has better things to do than listen to old Bat's whinge.
Where are you off to, Hedwig? There is another chair around here somewhere. Behind you.
Oh, no, I'm off to the library, actually. Marta's dark mood certainly hadn't sold the idea as the most appealing way I could imagine spending my morning.
Chronicling can wait, surely.
It's not like I'm going to forget last night anytime soon, eh? In the end, I did not need much convincing. The longer I could put off running into Eustace, the better. Even if Marta was feeling particularly sour. I brought the spare chair over and sat down for more conversation.
So, aside from last night's escapade in the Misericorde, how have you been doing?
Very well. Very well. I mean, there's a lot to get used to, but I am adjusting. Is there anything still confusing to you about the outside world? Oh, loads, I'm sure, but I'm carrying along. I did learn that there was a war going on, and that was quite a shock.
Oh, that old thing feels like it's been going on for most of my life.
It used to be much more of a worry, but these days it's exhausting to even think about.
It was a little more concerning when, good lord, Hexham was well over 20 years ago now, wasn't it?
What war is going on? Did we already talk about this?
So it's definitely going to be one of the myriad England versus France ones.
Got
but
it.
I'm forgetting my time periods to remember if this is the 100 Years' War or what. So we're going to check that real quick.
All right.
The Battle of Hexham. Oh, this was the Wars of the Roses. So this wasn't the England versus France stuff. This was the wars within England over the succession of the throne.
Got it.
This was when
Okay.
This was when the Lancasters and Yorks were fighting. And ultimately, the Tudors were the ones who won the fight between the Lancasters and Yorks.
Hell yeah.
Okay. I should have remembered that.
Oh, and Hedgley. A little bit more worried when those were going on. A bit closer to home, those were.
You would have been here in 64, Hedwig.
Just about, I think. Were you as well? I do not like talking about myself.
Not far. I was at the abbey across the valley and down the hill.
Just a quick little aside there.
Bourne Grove. I moved around a lot in those days. Durham, Richmond, Ripon.
What side of the war are we on?
I wouldn't worry about that.
It'd be hard for us to find any strong opinions on the war here, I'd reckon. They're fighting over who gets to be king. That's well above my opinion.
The church is above all these things. These are petty, worldly squabbles in the end.
Even though the royal bloodline is anointed by God?
That may be so, but men have found so many ways to bicker over the specifics of what God has said.
Too right, too right. What about you, Charity? Have you always been here at Lynbarrow? For a long time, yes, but not forever. I got my start at Bourne Grove, actually, and followed Marta here when she transferred. We were too good of friends to not go together, isn't that right? Marta had a thin smile on her face. Oh, what a nice story. Indeed. Have you been making any friends with the girls your age? The girls. This felt like a patently ridiculous way to describe a group of women I assumed were mostly in their 20s and 30s, but perhaps I'll understand when I'm Marta's age.
Every time she throws in a little hee-hee. And what are you laughing about? Well, I understand when she's Marta's age. I wonder if she's being coy about something with that comment. Because we know she's back in a cell, right? But we don't know if she's in her the cell of the anchoress or if she's in a cell for having being found guilty of a crime. I'm just saying it'd be a really dark thing for her to joke about if she was about to be executed.
Yeah.
I worry that I'm losing more than I'm making.
I'm sure that's not true.
I know for a fact Moira is quite taken with your presence, and Darcy for that matter.
And we don't invite just anyone to sit with us.
That's right. I smiled and leaned back. It was hard to get comfortable when my body still felt bent completely out of shape. Well, thank you. I should probably get to work, though.
Godspeed.
We're on your side. God bless her, but it was a mean thing Eustace did. I stood up slowly and offered Charity an appreciative smile as I left.
And we'll have to get to work next time. No? No? That's okay. I'll just do it on my own then.
I said it though.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I must have not heard it over how dramatically I was doing it on my own.
Smash that like, comment and subscribe.